Rolling, rolling, rolling.
Roll it, Mark. Let's go.
Yo. Take it away. Oh, now I can say your name, right?
Now you can say my name. Yeah, man.
Oh,
There's no more hiding. What's up, chat? What's going on?
what's up, Mia?
Well, that feels weird.
Well, today we're joined by the great Kevin J. Anderson, who's most famous in my life for the Jedi Academy series, which was one of the earlier Star Wars trilogies to come out pretty much. And I'm probably going to forget my exact dates and the chat will go crazy, but it came out, if I remember correctly, pretty much right after the Zahn trilogy, right? Or in somehow in maybe not after all the Thrawn trilogy books, but maybe after the second one. Your first one came out in 94.
It was right then. That Tim's was the very first hardcover trilogy, and mine was the first paperback trilogy that came out right after that. And Tim's books came out one a year in hardcover, but they wanted mine to come out much faster, so they brought them out in paperback, and they came out like every 3 months or something like that. Like boom, 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 they came out, which meant I had to write them all that fast and get them out. There was another book between Tim's trilogy and mine. It was Truce of Bakura by Kathy Tyers. Mm-hmm. And then there was mine. So it was really kind of fun at that time because all we had to watch was the movies. And there wasn't 400 other books that we had to read to keep track of. That this was wide open territory. And it was just, and when Tim did his books, so I got asked to write the Jedi Academy books, I think, right after Tim's first one was out. So that was like the one and only Star Wars book. And at the time, Star Trek books were coming out every single month. It was this machine, Star Trek, every single month. And when Tim did Heir to the Empire, it was like, whoa, Star Wars. We haven't seen Star Wars in forever. And that became a #1 New York Times bestseller. And basically it showed everybody, and the publishers like, holy crap, there's a lot of Star Wars fans out there, where all of us would go, well, duh, of course there's fans. Right. And so his first book came out, and they approached me right after that. So I read his second one, Dark Force Rising. They gave me a review copy of it because they kind of print up some review copies before it's published. Mm-hmm. And then I was talking with Tim a lot on the phone as he was writing it, as I was planning mine, and he sent me the manuscript for The Last Command. So I'm like getting up to speed to write mine right after his, and we planned this together. So he even planted a few things in The Last Command, a couple of characters that appeared in mine, and so we wanted this to all roll out. So my books were coming right after the end of The Last Command, and then in the middle of that, somebody told us, oh yeah, there's this Dark Empire comic graphic novel series that takes place right between them. And I went, what? There's a comic series? How come nobody told us about the comic series?
Right.
So I said, you better send me some free comics. So they sent me the Dark, and I love the Dark Empire thing. It was just great, but obviously entirely independent of Tim's. Mm-hmm. So I got to retcon, like, okay, now I got to fit both of these things together. And at first Lucasfilm said, it's the comics that, you don't have to take that into account. Just don't worry about what happens in it. And I said, well, what happens in it? And they go, well, Leia has a third child. Luke goes over to the dark side, and Emperor Palpatine comes back. And I go, oh yeah, so nothing significant happens. Right, don't worry about that. So I insisted on putting that stuff in.
That's really interesting because obviously that Dark Horse comic series that you're talking about, Dark Empire, is legendary, right? It's where we first see the whole cloning of the Emperor. I mean, it's some legendary stuff that resonates to this day. It's really interesting to me to hear you say that when you were writing the novel, obviously you're very tied into the Zahn trilogy, and I really respect and appreciate that there are so many tie-ins down to references to Zahn and characters that are going back and forth. Those two novels definitely take place in the same universe, but they told you not to do that for the comics?
Well, they didn't tell me not to. I think they hadn't really thought that far ahead, because remember, Tim's was just the first one they did. Mm-hmm. And unlike Star Trek, where there was a whole big plan month after month, Star Trek, I think Tim's book maybe took him a little bit by surprise by how hugely popular it was. And then they asked me for another trilogy, and then they started thinking, well, wait, do we have what is canon and what isn't, and what do we put all this stuff in? And I mean, a lot of this stuff, what we were making it up, and I worked a lot with Tom Veitch, the guy who wrote the Dark Empire series, and he taught me how to write comics, and then he and I wrote the whole Tales of the Jedi thing and the Dark Lords of the Sith and Exar Kun, and it just kind of mushroomed and blew all over the place. And remember, at the beginning, there was really only a handful of us working on it, and the Lucasfilm people were very often calling me or sending me a fax saying, another author wants to do this. Can you do that? And it just...
That's cool. So they'd like check in with you.
Well, and we were really involved, and I mean, now it's this gigantic. Well, now it's Disney and even bigger, but at the time it was kind of like this secret clubhouse that we would all just like get on the phone. And you're probably familiar with the anthologies that I did, the Tales from Jabba's Palace and Tales of the Mos Eisley Cantina and stuff. Yeah. And all of those stories, I mean, all of us authors were just on the phone, like, what did you do in your story so I can put it into my story? And it was just like, everybody just loved working on Star Wars, and it was such a blast. And we got to, we got to play with these toys that we watched when we were growing up. And I mean, I saw Star Wars when it came out in the movie theater. I mean, I was in high school, and I remember sitting, and I was the science fiction nerd, and I went with a couple of other science fiction nerds, and nobody else wanted to go see a science fiction movie. And we saw it the first week, and nobody had any expectations. Nobody knew anything about this movie. And I'm in this movie theater in a shopping mall in Madison, Wisconsin. And we're sitting in the movie theater. Like, I mean, look, I watched creature features and sci-fi cinema and all the black and white things. And I was a Star Trek fan. And so I mean, I love science fiction, but none of us was prepared for Star Wars. And all of your audience, you have to kind of rewind and put yourself in the 1977, was that the year it came out? I think that's what it was.
Yep.
Was it 77? Put yourself in that mindset that the fanfare opens up, the music, and then the screen is black, and then the roll-up starts. You've never seen anything like these tilted
with
letters.
That music just
in space.
Yeah.
And then the music, and then the Star Destroyer comes overhead, and it keeps coming, and it keeps coming, and it keeps coming, and it keeps coming, and it's like, you all have seen it a million times now, but we never saw anything like that. This was the first time our eyeballs had that. And another thing, when the Millennium Falcon goes into hyperspace for the first time and those stars elongate into your eyes, never seen anything like that. And of course, it's been imitated so many times, it's nothing special anymore. But
it's still special to me. I mean, it still gets me.
But I mean, just imagine like the first time anybody ever saw anything like that. I think we were walking out of that theater with like knobby knees and like, wow, how did that happen?
So keep me there. How did you actually get the gig or the opportunity to work on Star Wars?
Well, remember, like I said, Tim's first book had come out, but it wasn't like something I was trying to do because we didn't even know there was a Star Wars publishing program. I didn't even know there were comics that were out because I was writing my own science fiction books. I think I had published 7 original science fiction books, and a couple of them got nominated for awards, and they got great reviews. And I'm going to shatter all your illusions, but a critically acclaimed novel basically means nobody bought it.
Right.
It got great reviews, but it did not fly off the shelves like crazy. So,
what critically acclaimed means no one bought it, really?
Well, I'm being a little
I know.
Being sarcastic there. You know, it's like the movies that get nominated for the Academy Awards. Those aren't movies anybody ever watched.
Right.
Well, somebody did, but anyway, I wrote 7 of my own novels, and I worked with the editors at Bantam Books, and I didn't know that I was auditioning for this. I mean, they apparently. Well, they liked working with me because I wasn't hard to work with. I always delivered on time, and I wasn't a prima donna author, and I was very flexible, and I was very responsive whenever they asked for anything to change. So I was basically somebody that they felt would be good to work with, and they submitted my books to Lucasfilm to say, "Hey, how about this guy?" And they read my books and said, "Sure, how about that guy?" And I mean, I didn't know any of this. This was all behind the scenes.
Right.
And I got I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, so California.
While you explain this, I'm going to bring up some of your books for everyone to see.
You go right ahead. I'm on the West Coast, and I came home from work because I had a regular job at the time. I came home from work, and it was Friday afternoon, and it was my New York editor saying on the answering machine, Kevin, call me right back as soon as you can. I've got something really important to ask you, and call me as soon as you can. Of course, this was Friday afternoon, and it was after New York had closed. So I'm stewing all weekend long, like, what does my editor want? What is so important? And I called her up first thing Monday morning, and she just starts off with Kevin, do you like Star Wars? And I said, right. Of course I like Star Wars. Everybody likes Star Wars. What do you want? She says, how'd you like to write 3 sequels to it? And I'm like thinking long and hard for about a nanosecond. And I said, sure, I'd love to do that. And because I knew Tim's book was out there. I hadn't read it yet. And I just knew that there was a big Star Wars fan, and I was a big Star Wars fan. And I thought, sure, that's a natural. And they offered me the Jedi Academy trilogy. And well, they offered me a trilogy, and I'm the one who came up with the Jedi Academy part. But
right.
And then that spun off to the 3 anthologies and Darksaber and the Young Jedi Knight series and the Jabba's Palace pop-up book and the illustrated Star Wars universe, which is just one of the really cool ones because I got to work with Ralph McQuarrie month after month after month for like a year and a half. And that was just, Ralph was this legend, and I was just sitting in the studio as he's doodling away ice geysers and swamp monsters. And that was just very cool.
Oh man, you got to tell us a little bit more about that. You can't just name drop Ralph McQuarrie and not go into great detail. Very few people, and we've had them all on this show, Dennis Murin, etc. Not a lot of people have told us a lot of Ralph stories. What was he like?
Well, Ralph was okay. So the whole project it's this big, beautiful book, and I don't even know if it's available. If it is, you should get one because they're in trade paperback. It's
do you mean the double volume, the massive double volume book?
Well, there is. I have one of those, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
What I did was called the Illustrated Star Wars Universe. It was pitched to me as they wanted to do a National Geographic coffee table book of the planets in the Star Wars universe. And at the time, there were only 7, 8, whatever, the basic ones, Hoth and Tatooine and Alderaan and stuff. And so they wanted me to work with Ralph McQuarrie, and I happened to live within driving distance of both Skywalker Ranch and where Ralph lived. His studio was in Berkeley, California. And so we did, basically I had to write a fake National Geographic article about Coruscant or about Dagobah or about Hoth or about Tatooine or all the specific things. And I would sit with Ralph in his studio. Wow. And we would just talk, okay, this month we're working on Hoth and what could be interesting on Hoth.
Dude.
And so he's sketching away doing things, and I'm just coming up with these pie in the sky ideas about, hey, what about ice geysers? So there's like these volcanic vents, but Hoth is really cold, so the steam builds up like these giant monoliths of ice, and he's sketching away. And his studio was really cool that he had shelves and shelves and shelves of National Geographic magazines. But unlike, they weren't organized in like chronological order. This shelf had all the really great photographs of the Arctic. And this shelf had all the really great photographs of the Amazon jungle. And this shelf had all the really great photographs of the Sahara Desert. And so while we were doing this Hoth thing, he thought, I remember this really good icicle photo. And so he rummages through his National Geographics and pulls one of them out, and he flips to the page. And sure enough, there's like the most awesome photo of these dangling icicles from some, Arctic photo shoot. And so he's looking at this icicle photograph as he's painting things. And it's kind of a classic painting. He did it for the Illustrated Star Wars Universe book of it's AT-ATs walking on the snowfields of Hoth, and there's an ice geyser there, and there's kind of sun hitting off of a big icicle. And the sun hitting off of that icicle was like directly taken from this photo that he remembered from National Geographic, and he would send me letters, and I sent him the Jedi Academy trilogy, and he sent me back some letters with just a bunch of Ralph McQuarrie sketches doodled on them. And
Wow.
Oh man.
no, don't tell anybody I have those, but
Do you have those? Oh, I'm just gonna. Wow.
oh yeah, I have those. And we made up and Bespin, the Tabana gas mine. So we came up with all these gas refineries floating in the clouds, and one had turned into sort of like a ghost town because its gravitation generator had broken down, so it's kind of tilted and it's got skeletal girders all over the place. And I mean, I'm just like, okay, it's Bespin, why don't we do this? And he's got this little felt tip flare pen on white sketch paper, and it's just like a mile a minute sketching all these things. And he was very quiet and very humble and very sweet, and he didn't quite understand what all the fuss was about. And I mean, he's the guy that made Star Wars. I mean, the story is that George Lucas couldn't get studios to get what he was trying to do, and so he had Ralph paint all those. I mean, they're now classic paintings of like the Jawa sandcrawler coming over the dune, or there's the Luke and Darth Vader having their lightsaber battle on the Death Star. And I mean, these are all just things that Ralph read the script and he painted them, and George showed the paintings and said, "That's the movie I want to make."
Yeah. So in my head, I always thought George wouldn't let Ralph by himself, all that often. Did you ever interact with George Lucas during the times when you and Ralph McQuarrie were working on this book?
I met George, I think, twice, and he wanted to meet me because this project meant a lot to him because he was so close with Ralph. And he had read or approved, or I can't prove it, but he liked the Jedi Academy books, and he thought I would be a good pick for the illustrated Star Wars universe book. And he just wanted to make sure that the book came out, and he was so happy with the book when it came out that George bought a copy of it for every employee of Lucasfilm for Christmas.
That's cool.
That's pretty sweet.
Very cool.
Yeah.
See, I'm like a fanboy. You just put a nickel in me, and I'm just like going on.
Yeah, man,
I just loved working on this.
No, I'm just trying to figure where do we go next with these questions? Like, it's just.
So look, I would love to actually dig into Jedi, the Jedi Academy series a little bit, because to me, the fascinating thing about that trilogy of books, and I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, is that it is so similar thematically and narratively to what we got, in the sequels. Maybe not, look, it's no secret how people, think of how I feel about the sequels. I didn't like them. But in the Jedi Academy series, you have a lot of the same hallmarks as in the sequels. When you were watching the sequels, did that jump out at you? The Star Killer base versus the Sun Crusher, Kip versus Kylo. Did any of these things jump out at you when you were watching the sequels?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of stuff that I felt that was at least inspired by some of the stuff that I did. But and in fact, the Han Solo movie, all the spice mines of Kessel came out of my stuff, and the Kessel run, the black hole cluster named the Maw. I mean, so they clearly read my stuff, but they own it. When I wrote it for them, they own all this stuff. They could have just made Jedi Search as a movie, and they didn't have to ask me. I mean, there's no sour grapes here. All that stuff was theirs. It was their toys in their toy box, and they could do what they want. And I remember when I was watching the Solo movie, they just threw in this offhand mention of this Imperial Stormtrooper base called the Karita base, and I went, "That name, that's from my book." And so I get. I mean, imagine
that's where Kip Brothers dies. That's where Kip loses his brother.
Yeah, so just think about being a fanboy and watching the new Star Wars movie and going, "Ooh, that's from my stuff." And
that's sweet.
I mean, that's cool. I mean, I can certainly see similarities between Kylo Ren and Kip Duran, and that's cool with me. Kylo, Kylo, and Kip, Kyp. I mean, you're kind of
Pretty much, yeah. Very
You know,
similar.
but to me, the most fascinating similarity, and Nia, please jump in whenever you want here. But for me, the most fascinating similarity is actually how Kip turns to the dark side by the kind of metaphysical or spiritual or weird force connection that he has with Exar Kun, and Exar Kun is able to manipulate him from a great distance and get Kip to pretty much lose his bleep and go on a serious rampage, which is awesome. And that in the sequels you hear Leia say, oh, Kylo was lost when Snoke got to him, and that's pretty much all the exposition we get about that connection. But could you speak a little bit about how you kind of derived this telepathic, long distance, spiritual possession almost of Exar Kun and Kip?
Well, a lot of that, I mean, when I did the whole idea for the trilogy, I thought, well, let's do a Jedi Academy trilogy where Luke is training new Jedi, and of course, at least one of them's got to go bad. I mean, it's just kind of your obvious thing if you're going to do the group of Jedi Knights, that somebody's going to fall to the dark side, because we know that Luke's father was Obi-Wan's disciple, or they didn't have the word Padawan then. That Luke's father had been trained by Obi-Wan as a Jedi, and then he went to the dark side. So if Luke is going to train a dozen of them, at least one of them is going to go bad. So we want that story. I don't like evil bad guy villains. I like people who have made the wrong decisions and kind of gotten things worse and worse and worse. And Kip's a good guy. If you see him at the beginning, I mean, he gets rescued from the spice mines, and he's Han's surrogate son in the books. And he's a good guy, and he's just kind of overextends himself, and he takes this shortcut and he makes that shortcut, and he gets worse and worse and worse. And remember Michael Douglas in the movie Falling Down at the end, where he stands up and goes, "What, you mean I'm the bad guy?"
Right.
And that's kind of where Kip was. And then of course he redeems himself in the end. And so that's what we wanted to do. And then we wanted him to be possessed or manipulated by the quote, the spirit of a long dead Dark Lord of the Sith. And I hadn't really plotted much more than that. And then Tom Veitch and I started, I wrote the introduction for the Dark Empire collection. And so I got to know Tom Veitch quite well. He's the one who wrote all those scripts. And then Tom Veitch was just creating a brand new series called Tales of the Jedi, which took place, I think, 4,000 years before the movies. And I'm plotting my Jedi Academy books, and I had the spirit of a long dead Dark Lord of the Sith, and I didn't know anything more than that. And Tom is doing these Tales of the Jedi adventures with the history of the old Jedi 4,000 years ago. And so Tom and I were talking, and I said, well, what if my long dead Dark Lord of the Sith lived, I don't know, like 4,000 years before the movies, and we could tell his story in your comics? And he thought that's a perfect crossover, a great way to do the origin. And so we sort of developed that whole story of Exar Kun in the comics as I was plotting and writing the Jedi Academy books. So it was very intertwined and connected that way. And it just made it feel like we had a great plan all along. Well, let me throw in an editorialize here, because you commented about the sequel movies, and I'm sure you saw a couple of weeks ago that J.J. Abrams came out in an interview that said, yeah, maybe we should have had a plan for these 3 movies. Right. And I love Star Wars, and if you insult Star Wars, anything about Star Wars, it's like picking on my little sister. And I get to pick on my little sister, but you can't pick on my little sister. Right. And so I loved every Star Wars movie. There were lots of things that I would like to have done differently in several of them. But I have to say I was really pissed off when I heard JJ say that. Yeah. Because I thought, wait a minute, you are being handed a multi-billion-dollar intellectual property. And that's like, would Disney say to an architect, just build us a gigantic new multi-billion-dollar Disney theme park in Sydney, Australia. But you don't need to plan it ahead of time. You don't need to do blueprints, or you don't need to plan. Just start digging holes and building walls, and I'm sure it'll all come together right.
Right.
I mean, these are the three. You knew these were going to be the three biggest movies of the decade.
Do you blame him, or do you blame
Episode 7? This happens. Episode 8. This happens. And Episode 9. This happens. I don't understand that from a business perspective or a creative perspective. It you can tell it bothers me because I really this is like sacred territory to me as a fan, not just because I wrote in it, but as a fan, it's like, wait a minute, if you're being handed the job to do the last 3 Star Wars movies or the last trilogy or whatever, for Pete's sake, write up some notes.
Yeah, have a phone call.
Yeah, that's what
read your trilogy. Read your trilogy and just copy that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not advocating that they should have made my books or Tim's or anybody else's.
I think it would have been better if they made your books. As the sequel.
It's basically the same. Look, it's basically the same story. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
My question is, do you put the blame on JJ or Ryan, or do you put it on someone above him? And do you put it on Disney? It's like, I'm wondering who was the one that really.
I'm not gonna point fingers, but JJ is kind of notorious for making it up as he goes along, and that's how his process is. That's what he does.
You can't do that with Star Wars,
and that's and the Star Trek reboot, the motion picture, or whatever it's Star Trek, I think is all it was called. I mean, it had so much great stuff, and then it just kind of fizzles because they didn't plan it, and I feel that Ryan did a bunch of stuff in Episode 8, and then JJ kind of did, I don't like that, and I'm going to contradict everything. It's almost like Bobby Ewing waking up in a shower and going, "Oh, the whole last season was just a dream." And then they went
beyond them not having a plan, which is obvious. I think the thing that because look, I feel the same way. I'm doing a Star Wars podcast. That article that you speak of was actually published on my former site, that I own. So I'm obviously deeply embedded into this stuff, and I love the stuff. But to me, the greatest offense of the sequels was really in the treatment of Luke. And Luke had this incredible character arc that, for sure can evolve and change and be challenged and questioned as you move forward, but it can't be inconsistent. And with the Jedi Academy trilogy, it's a great example because Kip is a disaster. Kip is using a star-crushing spaceship to kill millions of people. I mean, he means well. Right. But he's as off the road as it gets. And throughout the entire story, and look, I haven't read it in so many years, but Luke is always trying to bring him back. Luke knows that he's worth saving, that there's still redemption in people. And I think that was the kind of thing with Luke that was precious as a character trait that was heavily violated in the sequels. Do you have any thoughts about Luke's treatment?
Well, I'm not one of the total haters of The Last Jedi. In fact, there were some parts in The Last Jedi that just blew me away. That the final battle with Kylo Ren, when it turned out it was just Luke's astral projection, just left my jaw on the floor. I thought that was just so astoundingly perfect that I loved that. And I loved lots of other parts of it. But that movie, every problem for the Empire would have been solved if they just landed a little bit closer to the target. I mean, the whole final battle across the salt flats, all the walkers, they land on the other side of the salt flats, and then they walk across so that they can get attacked. Well, if you're coming down from space, why don't you land on the right side of the salt flats instead of the far side of the salt flats? And the whole slow motion chase when they're chasing the rebel fleet and the Imperials pop out behind them and they're slowly. Well, if they had just popped out a little bit closer, end the movie, right?
Right.
So there's all that. And I did really like the Rey and Kylo fighting the Crimson Guard and Snoke, and person, and remember, I got to do this disclaimer. I am just speaking as a fanboy here. I have not worked with this
Same
film
as us.
for a long time. I don't have any connection to these movies, and they can make Jar Jar Binks and Ewoks movies if they want. That it's not going to be high on my priority, but if that's
I'd watch that. That'd be great.
I thought Snoke was kind of a boring villain. I just thought, who is this ugly guy, and where did he come from? And
Right.
you know, it didn't do a lot for me. But you know,
didn't you want to know more about him though until they, you know?
Well, the problem is that he just was basically a fifth generation carbon copy of Palpatine. I mean, he was still cadaverous and evil and kind of and then he dies, and then the Rise of Skywalker is, oh wait, we forgot to mention this the last movie, but Palpatine's back, and he has the giantest fleet in the entire universe, and we didn't notice that being built either.
You know what actually bugged me was the new comic that came out where it's between episode 5 and 6, and it's canon where Vader goes to Exegol and he's observing the entire fleet that's just chilling there, just sitting there, and Palpatine's, you know, walking around Exegol with him and just kind of like showing him everything that's going on, and then they go back to, you know, space, and they never talk about Exegol again. And it's like, why didn't you tell Luke this?
Why didn't you remember there's this big fleet sitting there?
What the heck?
I left the keys. But, you know, the thing that I just could not get past was the galloping horses on the outer hull of the Star Destroyer. And and then they don't even rescue the horses. They just blow up the Star Destroyer. So
which kind of like goes against everything Ryan did in the second film with that whole arc against the horse.
But like I said,
space horses.
This is my little sister, and you can't pick on her. So even Star Wars that makes me slap my head is still Star Wars, and I'm glad that we're getting something. And I don't even. I mean, I watch The Mandalorian every week. I'm a couple episodes behind on the Bad Batch, but I'm still a fanboy, and I still keep watching it. In fact, you guys tell me. I don't even know what Star Wars films are in the works now. Is there anything else?
Oh my God, man, dude! There's so much coming. There's the Ahsoka show. There's the Acolyte show, which I'm really looking forward to. That takes place 200 years before Episode 1, and it's supposed to govern. It's supposed to take place, or it's supposed to focus on a female Sith, a female dark side.
These are shows or movies or what?
These are shows. Yeah.
There's only one movie. There's only one movie in known development.
Yeah, what was it? Rangers? No, not Rangers. It was
Rogue Squadron.
Rogue Squadron. Yeah.
Yeah, it's directed by the lady who directed
Patty Jenkins.
Yeah, Patty Jenkins.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's the Obi-Wan show. I don't know if you know about that one. Yeah. I'm crazy about that one. I can't wait till it comes out.
Well, I mean, the Mandalorian just kind of reset everything for me because I went, wow, this is really good, and you can really keep doing this good, and it showed what they can pull off, and
what they can pull off with some planning. But I think it's because they have the right people behind. You know, Jon Favreau. Did you ever meet Dave Filoni? Oh no, I guess he wasn't there yet.
No, and I don't think so. But it seems like that the Favreau and Filoni seem like they're good in their heart, dedicated fanboys, and they want to make really good Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
And again, I've never met them. I'm just speaking as a fan. I really appreciate what they do. I think that they're and again, I don't know this. It did not feel to me that JJ had this deep understanding of the Star Wars universe. It just kind of felt like, wait, this isn't how you do that. And I don't know. I'm glad they came out, and I'm glad they were successful. And I guess I was the most disappointed in the Rise of Skywalker because it felt like they hadn't had a plan, and they were kind of scrambling to duct tape things together. And
yeah, that's a tough one. That's
backpedaling a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the fundamental core thing. Like, we don't know who Rey's parents are. And so the question is, what Ryan wanted to do was, and I kind of like this idea that Ryan wanted to do is, no, you don't have to be a noble bloodline from some famous, you don't have to be the Clintons or the Bushes. You can just be a random person and have the Force in you. Yeah. And that's a great idea. And I think it fits with the core of what Star Wars is.
Yeah.
But if you're going to take that approach, then don't make this gigantic mystery of who are Rey's parents,
Right?
because that doesn't matter. And then,
right, but that's the disconnect. But that's the disconnect we're talking about, because Ryan sets up that mystery box that he talks about in his TED Talks, as the device. Ryan comes in, they barely speak to each other. He's pretty much working in a vacuum, and he just goes with it wherever he wants. He doesn't really care about the mystery box thing anymore. He makes it nobody's, which I think is cool. To your point, it's not a bad angle, right? It speaks
like
to a
the
higher
end,
message.
but the kid in the stable gets the broom. I mean, that all of that is like, oh, cool. So we can all be Jedi. It does. We don't have to be.
That's something George said
Jr.
in one of the interviews I was reading from the Star Wars Archives book with Paul Duncan. He said that every person can use the Force. It just depends if they're into that thing or not, and if they train it or not. It doesn't mean they're going to be as powerful as Anakin, but they can all use the Force. So you, me, her, anybody. It's
So personally, I liked that direction better than, oh wait, Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter.
Yeah.
That just kind of, and I didn't like if Palpatine is coming, like in the Dark Empire comics, when Palpatine comes back, he's like lean and muscular and
right, young and
badass. Yeah, he's young.
Why would you bring yourself back and become,
right.
like all face?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
To go back to your novels for a second, because
let's go back to safer territory.
No, it's fine. We can go back and forth. I just really want to ask you these questions because we had Mike Stackpole on the show, and he was a great guest. And one of his novels is I, Jedi, and to me, it's always was so cool because I, Jedi is basically it's the same story that you're telling, but from a different perspective. Did you guys actually work with each other, or kind of compare notes, or like how did you guys kind of pull off that shortcut style, same Pulp Fiction-esque thing with I, Jedi and your novels?
Well, you got to know that Mike Stackpole and I met Mike Stackpole, I think, when I was 16 years old, and he was 18 or 19 years old. Mike Stackpole was running this little kind of a play-by-mail role-playing game company called, I think, White Buffalo, and he hired me to write some like world-building packets for him, and we've been friends ever since. I mean, this is 20 years before we worked on the Star Wars stuff.
That's amazing.
And so Luke at the Jedi Academy, Luke Skywalker has 12 Padawans, although they weren't called Padawans then. He has 12. And if you think of the symbolism there, if you've got Luke, messianic figure, having 12 disciples, and you take it from there. But I intentionally only named 6 of the 12 so that there would be 6 unnamed ones that somebody else could make up if they wanted to. And Mike called me and said, hey, I want to do this. And do you mind if one of those unnamed 6 is Corran Horn? I went, that's why I left them unnamed. You go right ahead. And
that's awesome.
So yeah, we worked on that. I mean, I didn't like tell him what to do or proofread his manuscript or anything, but he asked me about it, and we left some gaps for him.
If Lucasfilm were to call you today and be like, hey, we want you to create, what would you want to do going forwards? Would you want to continue where you left off, or would you want to create some new timeline in Star Wars with some new characters?
Well, the thing that I would probably love to do most is just some full-on novels like in the Tales of the Jedi period, because that's pretty much unexplored. And see, the thing is, there have been so many novels written. I can't possibly read all of those. Of course, they're all legends now, except for whatever the new batch is. And there's been so much stuff that when I wrote mine, I knew every iota of the canon. I knew every frame of every Droids and Ewoks cartoon, and I watched the Ewok movies, and I knew everything. But now I'm still finishing the last season of the Clone Wars, and I just can't even keep up just watching it, much less like when I'm writing it, I got to watch it on a constant loop. You got to keep this in your head. And if I were to try to write something in like the episode 8 time frame or something like that, I'm just not enough up to speed. And so Tales of the Jedi, or even pick a different 3,000 years before the movies, then that's kind of virgin territory, and you can have it look and feel like Star Wars, but you can have your own characters. And like when we made up Exar Kun and Ulic Keldroma and his brother Kay and all this was all brand new stuff, and we had all the planets we wanted to run around on, and we made up Korriban, the crypt planet of the Sith, and all of that was just like, hey, how about we do this, and how about we do this, and all the Young Jedi Knights books, we visited so many different planets and went to so many different places that we just had a blast with that.
You know, I'm going to pick your brain for a second because, you know, this is the beauty of this show is that I can. So with Korriban, right? I just got chills when you said that because I spent months of my life on Korriban when I was playing Star Wars, the Old Republic MMO, like 6-7 years ago. And Theory and I have projects where we need to name things that are not known things, but kind of similar. How did you come up with that name, Korriban?
I was just gonna ask that, man.
Were you really?
Yeah, literally. I was like, how did you come up with all these names? Because you know,
yeah. Like because I mean, you have Exar Kun. I mean, that is the coolest Star Wars
Master
name.
Bodo. Yeah.
Keldroma. I mean, like, what's the process?
You're asking me like I made this up 30 years ago, and I'm trying to go, really? You want me to come up how I came up with that name, Exar Kun, 30 years ago? I don't know. You just make funny sounds and what looks cool on the paper.
Okay.
You know, I actually think some of the names in Star Wars sound a little goofy, but I kind of want my Exar Kun. You know that's not a female character who's a bashful, starry-eyed romantic. With a name like Exar Kun, you know that's a badass dude, right?
Yeah.
I can't come up with any of these random ones, but Korriban, that name sounds like it's a Sith planet, right?
But like
Alderaan sounds like this bucolic, lots of grass.
But is there etymology in the word Korriban, like core based on a rock that you saw Macquarie draw, or ban, or is there like any type of like root words that you're playing off of?
He just made noises and he said it sounded cool.
You are overthinking it too much. We just that sounds cool, and we just throw it in, and a lot of them end up on the cutting room floor. Like Dorcas Dingus is not going to be a Sith Lord's name, right?
Should be the name of our character. Me and Mark are making a saber company. We have a character that we come up with, and we have a whole backstory. We just need a cool name, so. Maybe Dorcas Dingus can be.
Yeah, like Kip. I think Kip is such a cool name because it's such a.
Well,
what
Kip
I love about Kip is
name.
It's a hero's name. It's a hero's name.
But it's also a good guy's name, and they like Han is it's a fake name, but it's a perfect name.
Yeah.
Right.
You say the word Han, and it rolls off the tongue. It's so easy. And I wanted another like short 3-letter name. And I mean, Kip sounds like the kid next door. Kip sounds like this kind of Opie from Mayberry RFD or something like that. And that's intentional. He's supposed to sound wimpy and innocuous because he's going to turn into this badass. And like if his name, this kid's name was Exar Kun, you would never think he was going to keep being this naive little.
No, he was the popular guy in high school. That's Exar Kun right there. Yeah. You know who else was named Kip? Was Napoleon Dynamite's brother.
Well, I didn't see Napoleon Dynamite until much later.
You
guys are missing out, man. No.
Okay, so last question that I have about your novels, because to me, I always kind of wanted to see an on-screen representation of Jacen and Jaina because so much was written about them and they were in so many of the different books and stuff. And I know that you kind of got them when they were very, very young. Was there any kind of rules around Jacen and Jaina, whether from Tim or from Lucasfilm? Like, were they treating them as like the next generation of like Star Wars characters, or was it pretty much just do what you want?
Well, I don't think they had that much of a plan. I mean, they're born at the end of Tim's trilogy, right? So, and in fact, they're what, 2 years old, running around in Dark Apprentice. So they're like,
they're very young in yours.
Precocious 2-year-olds, and they're running around doing stuff. But I'm trying to write this book, and Tim hasn't finished The Last Command yet. And I remember bugging him several times, like, Tim, what are you gonna name them so I can put the names in my book? And
oh wow, that's cool.
finally he came up with Jason and Jaina. But they didn't really come on their own until the Young Jedi Knights books. I mean, they're 2-year-old kids in the Jedi Academy books, so it's not like fully developed personalities when you're 2-year-olds. But when you're teenagers, the Young Jedi Knights, we were able to really pull into, and Jason and Jaina in the Young Jedi Knights books are basically Rey and Kylo. I mean, that's right. The characters that they pretty much are. And we just ran with those, and we wrote 14 of those books, and they came out every 3 months for 14 books in a row. And so it was like this manic, because book number 6, no, the other way around. So book number 1 would come out while we were proofreading book number 2, because it was about to come out, while we were editing book number 3 because we hadn't turned it in yet, while we were plotting book number 4 because we needed to get started on that, and trying to keep track of what had actually happened and what hadn't happened yet. Was that's why you outline, that's why you plan these things ahead of time. And
I found it funny when Kathleen Kennedy, and mind you, this is not to discredit anything she's done, not that my words could. She's done a lot of great stuff for movies, but she said there's no source material for Star Wars, and I'm looking at your books, and I'm looking at Tim's books, I'm looking at everyone's books, and I'm just like, okay.
Well, I would love to hear her comment on that comment, because she's been dragged over the coals for that so many times.
Yeah.
And I mean, I admit I kind of had this knee-jerk being offended when I read that. I just went, but you approved all these books, so how did you not know they exist? So I don't quite know what she meant by that, because there was it doesn't have to be my books. There were 100 books they could have chosen from. Yeah. And to not and go back to what I said earlier, they own it all. So they can cherry pick whatever they want out of them. They own all this stuff. So it seemed
strange. Like Marvel,
I feel like
to choose from. And
I feel like they did go from the book. They did pick from the books. I mean, Palpatine comes back as a clone. Like, that's Dark Empire right there.
Well, I mean
not as cool,
but
the Sun Crusher.
But sometimes, though, there's an obvious look. I made up the Jedi Academy, and one of the students goes bad, and then they do Luke train other Jedi students, and one of them went bad. That doesn't mean that they stole it from my book, and they can't steal it because they
can't steal it. They own it.
It goes back the same exact way, for the record, for the listener.
Right, but it's kind of an obvious idea for a sequel if that's what you're going to do. And I personally don't think that J.J. Abrams read 190 books and tried to see what he liked out of all of them. I just can't imagine he would do that. So, they own all this stuff. They can do whatever they want.
No, I don't have any animosity towards JJ. I think he got a massive contract to write and direct Star Wars sequels, and he took it. But I just don't think he was qualified for the job, to be honest.
Well, we were talking about where do you put the blame, and I'm just not the creative thing, on a business sense.
Yeah.
If you're going to do these 3 movies that are going to be a multi-billion-dollar franchise, Disney is notorious for test marketing and planning to the last detail. So I just don't quite understand the business thinking behind just make up episode 7 and we'll figure out episode 8 afterward, and then we'll figure out episode 9 after that. When I sell a trilogy of books, I write my outline and I say book 1 this happens, book 2 this happens, book 3 that happens, and they need to see that before they buy it.
Right. So there is kind of a reason for it in a way, and the former CEO, his name escapes me right now, kind of touched on it in his books, and George Lucas himself touched on it. Bob
Iger.
Yeah, and Lucas in that interview with the guy from PBS also talks about it. When Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney, Lucas was brought on as the creative executive in charge of Star Wars. when they were making, they took the screenplay that him and Michael Arndt had developed for episode 7, and they wanted to change it around. And like Lucas says in his interview, and the quote is that they wanted to go quote unquote nostalgic with it, and that wasn't what he wanted to do. So he said it's better to just separate and just cut ties, because this is going to be, I sold it. I have to live with that. And I can't like sell it and not sell it at the same time, because they own it. They get to make the final decision. So Lucas steps away, and that creative executive role that he was filling didn't get filled up until just recently, when they assigned Dave Filoni to that role, I believe a few weeks ago. So for a very, very long time, there was no rudder, there was no creative North Star. And like Theory said, like Kathleen Kennedy is one of the most important producers in the history of Hollywood. I mean, you can't tell the Hollywood story without mentioning her name. It's just not possible, so, she's incredibly talented, but I think she thought, hey, if I hire the most creative people in the world, they'll figure it out. And when you're running a franchise as big as that, you need that Kevin Feige, George Lucas rudder to keep everything tidy, or and on mission, right? So anyway, I've said this 100 times.
Again, when we actually run the studios, we can call the shots, but for now we're just sort of little underlings. And I still enjoy them, even the parts that I didn't like, even the whole, like in Rise of Skywalker, the Death Star wreckage that's in the water with the giant waves, and they fly there in a spaceship and land, and then they get a boat to go over these waves. And I'm going, well, why don't you just fly a little bit farther and land on the wreckage there, just like Kylo Ren does, right? So
it's like the Millennium Falcon goes to that planet Bak-2 or whatever, Uktu, whatever it's called, the one with that Luke is hiding in, and they land on the bottom of the hill and make Rey climb like for 3 days up the mountain. But okay, last question about your book.
So we're not going to pick on the little sister. I still love Star Wars, and I get such a kick out of it, and I have all the soundtrack records, and I play them in the background, and they inspire me, and Star Wars has been very, very good to me. So I'm not.
Amen. Me too. And Theory as well, I'm sure. Last question about your books. This is the fanboy in me, and I got to get this out. Kip was. I'm trying to put my head around this. Was Kip ever formally Jason's master, and Jason was his apprentice, or how do you like talk? Yeah, explain.
I wrote this 30 years ago. I don't remember that. Right. I have now published 172 books, so I can't remember that detail of that book from 30 years ago.
Because to me, that relationship was fascinating. All right, well, look, like I said, I'm a fanboy, so I'll have to read it myself and come up with my own thoughts on it.
There's one question from one of your fans here. They say, Darksaber was a joy. How did you come up with the idea of the Jedi focusing their powers to eliminate each other's weaknesses and bolster each other's strengths during the act of pushing away Adam Star Destroyer?
Well, see, that was actually a discussion in Lucasfilm, and Tim Zahn was in it, and we were trying to decide what the limits of a Jedi's powers were. Because there was one other author at the time, I won't say who it was, and this was not approved, but there was that Luke got so powerful that he himself could just knock Star Destroyers out of the sky and stuff. And we thought, if you give powers that bad, that's kind of, that makes them boring. I mean, it's Superman with no kryptonite. And
it's like a cheat code.
We really had to figure out what was the limits of a Jedi's power. I mean, obviously Yoda's lifting X-Wings and stuff like that, so you could do that. And I think I had, if I remember, something in Darksaber where Luke actually, he doesn't fly, but he's like falling out of a orbiting, well, he's not orbiting, it's in the atmosphere, and he's using the Force to sort of slow him down enough so that he can make a soft landing. And we felt that was a perfect extrapolation of, you can lift X-Wings, so why can't you lift yourself and just make yourself not crash? But in the scene that the questioners talking about, I believe all the Jedi apprentices sort of got together and kind of combined their powers to push a Star Destroyer either out of orbit or again, this was a long time ago and I haven't read it since. But we felt that if they could all pool their powers and all of them put it together, it would be an additive thing, and then they could do it. But then there is the kryptonite, because one of the Jedi dies during that. It sort of burns him out because he's focusing the conduit, and it fries his brain to do that. So we were careful not to make the Jedi too super powerful. That was another little objection we had in The Last Jedi, where Rey trains for 5 minutes, and suddenly she's able to do all kinds of things. And that's the limitations of a movie. I mean, if you show somebody training for 6 months, it gets to be a long and boring movie. But I believed what Lucas had said in that other interview, that if everybody has the Force and everybody can tap into it, it's got to be very rare that somebody can do like Anakin level powers.
Which is why I guess he introduced the midi-chlorians and everything. I know I told you 30 minutes. We're now going on an hour.
30 minutes. That's long.
You're very interesting to speak with, and it's your fault. So, did you want to shout out Wordfire and let the audience know?
Well, obviously I've written other stuff, but besides Star Wars, I've done a lot of Dune novels with Brian Herbert, and we've got a new one coming out in September called The Lady of Caladan. That'll be our 16th book Dune novel that we've done together, and we've got a monthly comics coming out from Boom Studios called House Atreides. That's also Dune. The Dune graphic novel just came out. I've got a really big kind of Game of Thrones epic fantasy trilogy that started with Spine of the Dragon, and the second book called Venge War, and the third one comes out in January called Gods and Dragons. So it's like Game of Thrones, only mine's actually finished. So those books are coming out. Well, the first two are out already. And if wordfire.com, there's like a readers group newsletter thing you can sign up for, and you get a free collection of my short stories, a free audio story that I read, plus a bunch of newsletters and things. Oh, and I don't have that many of them left, but I've got a bunch of signed Star Wars books we have a web store called wordfireshop.com. And in fact, we just got like 20 sets of the Jedi Academy trilogy that I signed and put up there in 6 hours. They all sold.
Right on.
This one.
They're all sold out now.
Hold on. This one.
We got some more.
Because I couldn't figure this out, but when I was prepping for this interview and I was looking up stuff about you, it says that you have the Guinness Book of World Records for the biggest book signature of all time, that it ousted Stephen King. But I couldn't figure out which book it was. Was it a Dune book or?
No, it was called I, Pedrito. It was sort of a funny spy versus spy thing, but it was written from an old movie script that L. Ron Hubbard had written. And I've been a judge for the Writers of the Future contest for 28 years, and we novelized it, and this was the first new book of his, and he's got armies of fans, and we shut down a boulevard in Hollywood Boulevard, and we had a band and free banana splits, and I think I signed 2,000 autographs in one night as they were just coming up. And it was sort of like a Walking Dead zombie invasion, but except they all had books and they wanted me to sign them. And so, I've got, looking up at it right now, a Guinness World Record there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, cool.
Well, we thank you so much for your time, your extended time here, and chat. We hope you enjoyed the interview. Go check out all of his books. They're all on Amazon and everywhere else, and bookstores and all that stuff. So thank you for your time, and thank you for your time, sir. We will catch you all later. Until then, rise, my friends.
StarWarsTheory.com.